the extinction narratives are increasing, and more people are talking about what's going on. And if you subscribe to this channel, you knew all of this was going down and going to be happening. Years ago, you knew this was coming. One thing we hardly ever do is talk much about Fukushima, mainly because there's not much you can do about it, except take iodine and move away from the coast. But it's killing the Pacific. But it's not just killing the Pacific. It's not the only thing killing the Pacific. The heating of the surface temperatures via solar radiation is killing the Pacific by creating cyanobacteria and all kinds of algae. But that's storage of thousands and thousands of containers of radioactive stuff. They're dumping it in the ocean. Who's going to stick around and guard this for 5,000 years? Not me. And the other thing is methane. The methane is just starting to go crazy. We're in a runaway methane event. The graphs prove it. They're accelerated. It's incredible. Thousands and thousands. I'm talking tens of thousands of methane vents are being mapped through special photography. And NASA knew this day was coming, and they developed the technology to see methane in certain wavelengths. And north of Greenland, I mean, it doesn't matter where, Russia, permafrost, Arctic, you name it, it's venting. Even off the coast of New Zealand, off the coast of New Jersey, off the coast of California, and now Four Corners region of the United States in the Southwest. Thousands of methane vents related to man-made activity. Some of these things, the ground was heating, the shale was heating, there was fracking going on. These vents started leaking, these wells started leaking. It shows you how extensive the glut for natural gas has become. Why? Because the government is hoarding it and going to use it to power the underground facilities into the next decade. And some areas were recorded as releasing as much as 11,000 tons an hour. Some areas. And that was temporary. It's not constant. So these are like blowing. They're venting. It's called devolatilization, when it expands so much that it kind of like a balloon popping. It lets go. And if that wasn't bad enough on the methane topic, then we see how much methane the African wetlands and even the Everglades are releasing more and more methane. Why? Because cool water traps methane, warm water releases methane, and now the water is warm. And if the climate was warming, the glaciers would be melting, and the melt that usually water seeps down towards Earth, the gravity pulls it in towards the ground. These glaciers develop underwater rivers, and these tunnels go all the way up the glacier. You can follow these tunnels all the way up and hike them all the way up the glacier. So, I mean, there's the proof. There's so much overwhelming evidence that we're warming. I mean, all you got to do is walk outside and lay in the sun for a while, right? So, but even time-lapse comparison of certain glacier fields show you what our glaciers have been doing. And of course, people will minimize the rate at which this is happening by saying, oh, we're coming out of an ice age. Hey, yeah. Well, that's true, but how fast we're coming out of this ice age is incredibly accelerated. The melt has just gone over the top. And if that was happening, then the ice caps, the ice sheets would become thin, and they would start to shrink. And we see these polar bears aren't the fattest polar bears, but the landlocked polar bears are. And I wanted to point out this because I'm not a climate activist. I'm just a researcher. And This was reported as bears being so hungry they were fighting over pieces of plastic. Well, these are landlocked bears. The landlocked bears are doing much better than the ice-locked bears and the ocean-locked bears. The ones out on the Arctic are just in major trouble. Many have died already. But these bears were playing with plastic. So yeah, you guys, got to watch your reporting a little bit. If you're a climate activist, you've got to make sure you don't give your opposition any fuel to discredit you. And when two cubs are playing, these are actually younger yearlings, are playing playing tug of war, and the mama bear is sitting up, she's as fat as can be. No, they're not fighting over plastic to eat. If there was more heat in the atmosphere, what would happen too is that you'd have more evaporation. That's 5th grade science. I don't think you have to be a scientist to figure out hotter air temperatures causes water to evaporate faster, and hotter air holds more water. And so the record precipitation since 2010, 2011 has been astronomical. We hear the word biblical flooding all the time. And gosh, I just remember when I was watching that flood in Australia in 2011, they called it biblical. And so, yeah, the flooding has been heartbreaking. And you're talking hundreds of millions of people displaced in the last 10 years. And then there's the fires. This is an image of fire, the smoke being drawn into a thunderstorm. I wonder what that does to your rainfall when there's ashes in your rain. That's kind of creepy. And look at that gray. That whole gray, as far as you can see, that's smoke. And I've seen this with my own eyes over California a year and a half ago. Once you cross the Sierra Nevadas, you could see no land until you landed. Why? Because the smoke covered the entire state west of the Sierra Nevadas. Australia is just telling us what we got to look forward to in our summer. They're breaking heat records, so when summer comes again for the Northern Hemisphere, guess what's going to happen? They're going to break heat records again and again and again. And it's been a constant theme. It's been so obvious that even the deniers have to backpedal. They look like liars, not deniers. And the mass animal deaths are the most disturbing. We made a video showing you a list of just the mass death, not the increased turnover and shortened lifespan of animals, but the actual killing, mass sudden die-offs. And there's very few things that can do this to animals. They kill them all at the same time. And it's happening all over the globe. And there's just so many stressors. There's, the plastics. There's just everything that stresses the fish out. Red tides don't kill fish, but man, if you heat your water, you deplete your oxygen, you eat a bunch of plastic, you got a fish that's not the healthiest. A red tide will kill that fish where it didn't used to. And the blue-green algae kills everything. It'll kill whatever eats the fish. And if there was a star, every time we try to say there's a brown dwarf fragment in our solar system with a rapid spin, a strong magnetic field, slinging helium and electrons all about, then everywhere you look for that evidence, you could just predict 100 things that would do to your solar system, to your climate. One of those things is, well, if there's more plasma in your atmosphere, then the lightning will start splitting more and more of those atoms. When you split helium, which is a conductor of electricity, when you split helium, you create alpha particles and subatomic particles that release gamma radiation. And guess what they're finding? they're finding lightning is now releasing gamma radiation. Woo, let's all go out and enjoy the lightning storms. And the more electrons in your atmosphere, the more lightning, the more rain, the more clouds you can form. And if there are more particles and more solar wind, and if there was all of this helium being slung at us in waves, certain things would be happening. If this helium was being gravitationally focused by all the planets and the sun, then those atmospheres would be changing. Not only would the sun be heating up in the corona from all the particle interaction and ionization and collisions, but all the other planets would be changing, not only from the hot sun, but from the interaction of the particles themselves. We've been chronicling and documenting as they occur the changes in Jupiter. And we've showed you many changes in Jupiter. If you haven't been a sub to this channel, I'm sorry you missed all those changes in Jupiter. Just ask, and one of my subs will kindly fill you in on all the changes that have happened in Jupiter. The most recent is they found another storm circulating around the southern vortex. The southern vortex itself is as big as the United States. So are the subsequent vortexes. It's a very high spinning vortex. It's giving off a lot of infrared energy. And so they've got another storm that showed up. And this is nothing new. The planets have been doing this for the last 15 years. Uranus has an extra storm on it that now is visible with a good telescope. The northern hemisphere of Saturn has turned from a sphere to a hexagon. All of the atmospheres have changed in their visual color. It's all been changing. And so now, instead of 5 southern vortexes, there is 6. So there must be a lot of interaction going on. And when you go to the instruments, this is, I mean, if you want actual hard data, here it is, right in front of your face. An incredible increase, a huge spike in helium. And only when the satellite passes a certain portion of the sun, proving that the helium is being focused. And in those focusing cones, they're finding ionized helium. They're finding exotic cosmic rays, like many of the ones that neon and stuff like that you would find in some of these exotic lights. They're finding traces of those elements in the focusing cone. That stuff is the product of stars. So what's a star doing so close to our solar system that the sun is focusing in many of those exotic gases? And remember, 2.5 years ago, we made videos about the auroras. Maybe it was 3 years ago now, because everything's such a blur. But the white auroras that NASA said are rare but common. Now, what NASA really meant to say is they were rare, but they're becoming more common. Just like everything else that used to be rare is now becoming more common, like record-breaking temperatures and heat-related illness and heat-related deaths and shrinking of our water supply. So we told you what Steve was. We told you that very few particles emit white light, that the biggest, most notorious culprit in white light emittance are electrons. Period. And we showed you simulation after simulation where the electrons were just going through the ceiling. And just this week, or was it this month, scientists think they figured it out. 2.5, 3 years after we told you what was going on, they're talking about it's an interaction of plasma with electron streams. Did you hear that? Electron streams. Well, what's different about the plasma and the electron streams today to make this phenomenon, which they call Steve, by the way, to electrons, okay? You shouldn't call it Steve, you should call it streams of electrons. So tell Steve, thank you for the beautiful display of white light in white auroras. And they figured it out. They figured it out, but guess what? The privileged members of the Higher Truth Channel knew what Steve was 3 years ago. So they're smarter than apparently the scientists who just apparently figured this out. Well, ladies and gentlemen, scientists knew all along what Steve was. They'd just been given permission to talk about it. Because there's very few things it could be. And every physicist on the planet knows that electrons emit white light. And the effects of a heating climate, you think, would not be disadvantageous to the reindeer. When you melt the snow, it's easier to get to the tundra. But the problem is when the snow freezes at night. It creates a hard ice, not a snowpack and not a snow layer, but an ice layer. And these guys don't carry sledgehammers, okay? So literally, if I were to say 50,000 caribou have died in the last 10 years from starvation and disease, I think I'd be awfully close in that estimate. And guess what? It's happening all over the globe. Well, if there was a large object out there doing all this and slinging helium our way and lithium and neon and all of those, glowing gases, argon and those things would be obvious and we would be detecting them, and we are. But also objects would be slung in and out of our solar system, and eventually our sun would grab hold of them, or Jupiter would grab hold of them, and there would be all kinds of stuff flying through our solar system. And hence our fireball counts that have broken sound barriers have gone from 1 report per year to 400, 500 reports a year of fireballs breaking the sound barrier, coming so close to our Earth that they're creating a sonic boom. So that's easy, that's documented, that's record. You can't just ignore all of that and pretend it's not happening when you're trying to say, no, there's no such thing as a brown dwarf. And here's an article that kind of tells you what's going on. What you should know about the solar system's second interstellar visitor. This is such a joke of an article, okay? Because they're comparing this new asteroid that's doing a flyby. They're comparing it to Watmu, or whatever they named that ridiculous asteroid that came through here. That was very elongated. It looked like a cigar almost. Listen, they call that interstellar. Okay, but meanwhile, since 2009, we have recorded and documented over 2,500 brand new comets. Brand new. So if they were part of the Jupiter family, they wouldn't be brand new. Trust me. They'd have been coming here every 50, 60, 70 years. They'd come back around. These are brand new comets. And because these look like asteroids and come from so far away and not the asteroid belt, they have to call them interstellar. Interstellar means like from the stars. Well, that's what they said about the helium. It's interstellar helium coming from the stars, light years away. Well, if these interstellar visitors are light years away and we've never seen them for 50 years, and all of a sudden we have 2 in 1 year, interstellar visitors from Neverland, from Infinity Land, come running through our solar system on the same types of inclined orbits, let me suggest to you that they're coming from the Kuiper Belt. Let me suggest to you that they're not interstellar because they're orbiting the sun. Allow me to suggest to you that anything that orbits the sun and comes so close to the sun is part of the sun's sphere of influence. Just because it's coming over the top of the solar system from so far away, or the bottom of the solar system from so far away, does not make it any different than the objects coming in at shallower angles, at more equatorial angles, at less inclined angles. All of this stuff is coming from the Kuiper Belt. So we have 2,500 comets that we've never seen before, and they all show up in a span of 10 years. That's a lot. We're having fireballs breaking the sound barrier where we never used to have them breaking the sound barrier. And now we have these interstellar visitors. Okay, guys? There's something out there. And it's giving off cosmic rays. And it's affected Earth in every way you would think or predict. And every time you go look to verify one of those logical predictions, every time you go look, you don't find evidence to debunk that theory. All you find is evidence that supports it.